Okay, the Lord be with you.
Also with you.
Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day, and I thank you for each and every person that's sitting here, and just open up our hearts and our minds to what Isaiah has to say and help us to have the wisdom to put it into our daily lives. Heavenly Father, be with those who are not here, and whatever reason they are not here, just help them if they need your help. If not, just keep them safe and out of harm's way. Heavenly Father, we thank you for all the many blessings that you give to us, and I thank you most of all for the blessing of being able to teach this class. I have learned so much already from Isaiah, and Lord, I just pray that you will continue to open up not just my mind, but those that are here in the class. Heavenly Father, be with the Hankies. I have no news, and so I'm not sure what's going on there, but we're all hoping that Glenn is continuing to improve, and he will soon be 100% again. Heavenly Father, I ask all of this in Jesus' name, amen. Okay, I will try to find out. I'm going to call Dot sometime this week and hopefully find out more about Glenn. But I'm sure if he was back in the hospital, she would have called me. So I'm assuming that he's still at home and he is improving. Okay, today we're looking at chapter 5, verses 1 through 30. And the first we're going to look at are verses 1 through 7. Chapter 5, 1 through 7 starts out as a lyric, and it becomes a courtroom drama, and finally casts the figurative aside to identify Judah as the object of the Lord's judgment. Isaiah's oracles are enclosed between chapter 1 and chapter 5. After that, I'm not sure. You will notice if you look in your Bibles, the reading becomes what we're used to, not poetry, okay? His oracles are done in poetry. So 5 will end the oracles. I will read verses 1 through 7. And in my book, my Bible, it says the Song of the Vineyard. I will sing for the one I love a song about his vineyard. My loved one had a vineyard on a fertile hillside. He dug it up and cleared it of stones and planted it with the choicest vines. He built a watchtower in it and cut out a winepress as well. Then he looked for a crop of good grapes, but yielded only bad fruit. Now you dwellers in Jerusalem and men of Judah, judge between me and my vineyard. What more could have been done for my vineyard than I have done for it? When I looked for good grapes, why did it yield only bad? Now I will tell you what I am going to do to my vineyard. I will take away its hedge, and it will be destroyed. I will break down its wall, and it will be trampled. I will make it a wasteland, neither prune nor cultivated, and briars and thorns will grow there. I will command the clouds not to rain on it. The vineyard of the Lord Almighty is the house of Israel, and the men of Judah are the garden of his delight. And he looked for justice, but saw bloodshed, for righteousness, but heard cries of distress. Verse 1 through 2, Isaiah is using a role play, which is a device that's used time and time again in the Old Testament prophets. Here Isaiah assumed the guise of a folk singer. Did he actually sing the words to a folk song, a folk tune of the day? Perhaps. But the Spirit may simply have given Isaiah the prophecy in lyrical form possibly the folk singer, was really singing at first a love song and was identifying with the friend of the bridegroom, which is the best man. If this is so, the bride and the groom are depicted figuratively in terms of a vineyard and its owner. The use of vineyard for bride is often used in the Song of Solomon, if you've ever read it. It isn't until the last part of verse 2. In verse 3 and 4, it says, now there is a dramatic change, and it goes from being a lyric to the courtroom. And the hearers are to act like assessors. In other words, they're there to determine what's going to be done about it. Assessors as the owner of the vineyard speaks. This new form suggests the vineyard has moral responsibility. Their discerning listeners may have the first clue that the parable may not be for their comfort. Now, in verse 5 and 6, where the abandonment of such an unprofitable venture was only to be expected. I mean, if we owned a vineyard and it didn't produce a crop, we would get rid of it too, wouldn't we? Yeah. Who would waste further energy and time and money when it wasn't going to be a profitable adventure? But there was more than this definite action. The removal of the hedges and the wall would be taken against it. The hidden meaning comes closer to complete the unveiling, okay, when the last statement in verse 6 is uttered. And that, what is said there is, the end is, he's saying, I will, well, if you look at verse 6 total, it says, I will make it a wasteland, neither prune nor cultivate it, and briefs and thorns will grow there. I will command the clouds not to rain on it. So basically God's saying it's going to be gone. You know, I'm not going to waste any more time on it. And then what does he say in verse 7? He says, the vineyard of the Lord Almighty is the house of Israel, and the men of Judah are the garden of his delight. And he looked for justice, but saw bloodshed, for righteousness, but heard cries of distress. They are now, the hearers, okay, fell into the trap that was skillfully set, okay, for them. Here, you know, Isaiah is speaking to Judah, okay? And he's presenting this story to them. And then he's asking them for their help, right? What would you do for this person who owns this vineyard? Well, who owns the vineyard? Right, God owns it. And like it says, the garden, the men of Judah are the garden, okay? And so he's upset because they're not doing what they're supposed to do. They didn't produce wine, did they? Grapes. They produced bad fruit. So God is going to take care of them. He's going to pass out his judgment. So from here, see, it goes from verse 6. In verse 7, it takes away what they call the figurative form. Okay, in other words, he's not using role-playing anymore. He's now stating the facts. And so it's dropped, and God's people are standing there exposed as the guilty objects, okay, of his disappointment and his judgment. And they have condemned themselves because they're the ones that ended up sinning and turning aside, going to the pagan gods. So now he's more or less told them, okay, now you got to listen to what I'm going to judge you, how I'm going to judge you. The next section with 8 through 30 is all about the woes and the judgment. And there are 6 woes, and then after the woes comes the judgment. And that takes us to the end of it. So who would like to start reading? Read the woes, which will take you up through 23. Yeah, 23. Who would like to read? Debbie?
Woe to you who add house to house and join field to field, till no space is left and you live alone in the land. The Lord Almighty has declared in my hearing, surely the great houses will become desolate, the fine mansions left without occupants. A 10-acre vineyard will produce only a bath of wine, a homer of seed, only an ephah of grain. Woe to those who rise early in the morning to run after their drinks, who stay up late at night till they are inflamed with wine. They have harps and lyres at their banquets, tambourines and flutes and wine, but they have no regard for the deeds of the Lord, no respect for the work of his hands. Therefore my people will go into exile for lack of understanding. Their men of rank will die of hunger, and their masses will be parched with thirst. Therefore the grave enlarges its appetite and opens its mouth without limit. Into it will descend their nobles and masses with all their brawlers and revelers. So man will be brought low and mankind humbled, the eyes of the arrogant humbled. But the Lord Almighty will be exalted by his justice, and the holy God will show himself holy by his righteousness. Then sheep will graze as in their own pasture, lambs will feed among the ruins of the rich. Woe to those who draw sin along with cords of deceit, and wickedness as with cart ropes. To those who say, let God hurry, let him hasten his work, so we may see it. Let it approach, let the plan of the Holy One of Israel come, so we may know it. Woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who put darkness for light and light for darkness, who put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. Woe to those who are wise in their own eyes and clever in their own right. Woe to those who are heroes at drinking wine and champions at mixing drinks, who acquit the guilty for a bribe but deny justice to their innocent.
Okay. I'd like to read the house-to-house explanation that's on page 48. It says, land in Israel could only be leased, never sold, because parcels had been permanently assigned to individual families. And of course, we saw this in 1 Kings. The land belonged, and we also saw it when we studied them going into the Promised Land, that it was all doled out to the different families. The land belonged to the Lord. The people were his tenants. His law declared that leased land must revert to its original owners every 50 years. However, in Isaiah's time, rich men were buying peasants' land and ignoring the 50-year limit. So, in other words, they were becoming land rich. You know, they kept buying land, and really they were going against all the rules that God had set up by giving them the land. So the prophets responded to the sin of covetousness of the land in their recognition that the land really belonged to God, and that he had made various tribes and families stewards of it. In verse 9, the Lord Almighty is in my ears. Judgment of God would descend on each of the rich. Basically, that's saying that the Lord is speaking to Isaiah. He's telling them, you know, and the judgment that God's going to, put down on Judah, and it's going to descend heavily on the rich, because they're the ones that are more in control. Remember, we always have that remnant, but that remnant isn't more than likely rich people, okay? We see it in today's world, don't we? I mean, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. Isn't that the saying? And it's true, though, isn't it? And when we stop and think about, the different rich, the rich that are well known in our, in our country. You never hear about them losing their money. Although I did read on the internet. That's where I get my news, because I hate listening to news on TV. Haven't probably for 40 or more years. That there's football players that became millionaires overnight, because of their skill on the football field. And how many of them are now paupers, lost their millions because of,
about financing. They've never been taught anything.
Right, and they lost it because they didn't have, the wherewithal, I guess, to know that they needed to get a financial person involved. And not only that, but some of them probably squandered it, bought big houses, which they didn't really need, and all these cars and stuff like that. And
Got advisors who weren't helping them.
well, right, they were helping themselves. But, okay. Looking at verses 11 through 17, this is actually let's go back. The first woe is verse 8, okay? And that's where we talk about the going who add house to house and join field to field, okay? And in verse 11 through 17 is addressing the second woe. I have them numbered and highlighted in my Bible. I don't know how you want to keep track of them, but that's what I did. And but 11 through 17, the woe that they're talking about is what? Drunkenness, right. And there are a lot of prophetic passages that condemn drunkenness. And not only, we got more also in Isaiah, and then Hosea 7:5 and Joel 3:3 and Amos 6:6 also address it. I didn't look any of them up, and I don't expect to do it here, but if you're interested, there I can give them to you again. And also here in Isaiah, we're going to see them because verse 22 also addresses it, and 22:13 and 28 verses 1 through 8 in Isaiah also address drunkenness. Most societies consider early morning drinking a mark of moral decay, because if your first thought of a drink, you are in its grip. And don't we know that if you've even read about or talked to somebody about alcoholics? I was married to one, but he did not want to drink in the morning.
My dad was one in the same way.
He never drank on the job. He never missed a day of work. When he got off work, that's when he drank until the bar closed. And so saying that doesn't always fit every criteria, every person, but it is one of the common things with alcoholics is that they want to drink first thing in the morning. But it's not necessarily true of every alcoholic. So, well, and also the second part of that is that they can't pull their weight at work. So, and that's true in a lot of examples of an alcoholic person. They start their day with a drink and end it with banquets where wine is plentiful, and they will celebrate. It's like one big party every day. The penalty, like the previous woe, is to remove them from the land by exile, where their feasting and drinking would come to an end. If we look at verse 16, it says, "But the Lord Almighty will be exalted by his justice, and the holy God will show himself holy by his righteousness." This is often treated as summing up the connection between holiness and righteousness in Isaiah. And verse 17 shows the affluent agricultural society of the day reverting to a more pastoral one, with the animals taking over the ruins. And that's, it says, "The sheep will graze as in their own pasture, lambs will feed among the ruins." And that's a pastoral look at it, okay? And the third woe is verse 18 and 19. And here, Isaiah at this point has pictured sinful Judah, not now loaded with guilt as it was on their backs, but drawing it along as a heavy load behind them. Okay, he says, "In those who say, 'Let God hurry, let him listen his work, so we may see it. Let it approach. Let the plan,'" now I missed it. No, I didn't. Let the plan of the Holy One of Israel come, and so we may know it." They're not, in other words, sometimes when you feel guilty, don't you feel like it's all on your shoulders? If you have done something and you shouldn't have, and you're trying to think of, don't you feel weighted down? But see, that's not happening here. They're not feeling that, but they're dragging their guilt along. It's where it's kind of like, I had this picture of them, with a big long rope and their guilt behind them, and they're just kind of, pulling it behind them. But pictures, are different, but meaning the same. I mean, no matter where their guilt is, whether it's on their shoulders or their backs, or they're dragging it along, they still have that guilt, don't they? Yeah, so it's not taking the guilt away because you're dragging it, opposed to having it on your back. Acceptance of deceit, the big lie, which happens in verse 20, set their feet on sin's worrying treadmill. So what that's saying is that all their sins, they've accepted the deceit of the lie, which is good is evil, but no, evil is good, but and good evil, who put darkness for light and light for darkness. That's the lie that he was referring to back in 3. And because of that, they've accepted that deceit, so that's set them on this treadmill. If you can picture, they're not, if you've ever been on a treadmill, you got to keep moving, don't you? The machine forces you to keep moving. Well, and they're doing, their sin, right, their sin is making them like they're on a treadmill. They're not getting off of it.
Another spam.
No, this is a text message. Verse 19 sums up the people's sin and exhibits its true nature as cynical rejection of the living God and his ways. And so we know that. How do we know that they really rejected God and his ways? What have they done that shows that to us?
Worshiping idols,
Right. And
sacrificing them to pagan gods.
okay.
Well, same thing.
Right, they've turned their backs on gods. They put their faith, if you want to call it that, in pagan gods. And it started a long time ago, not just,
Why is that too? If you think about it, like God hurry up, like they seem to not be worried about anything.
Right. Well, they think they're going to get away with it, don't they? I mean, that's their way of thinking until God suddenly hits them over the head, with his judgment. And then they say, oh, okay, we were wrong. But it's a little too late. A little, they should have listened sooner. Looking at, so woe 4 is verse 20. And here, I already read it, it's talking about them thinking that evil was good and good evil. And the darkness for light, they put the darkness for light and light for darkness. Who put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. This woe has a link actually to the previous one, for deceit is there shown as skepticism about the ways of God. They're saying more or less, well, God wasn't fast enough to come around to help them or whatever, so they went to pagan gods. And unhappily, it is an easy journey from said skepticism to the total reversal of values this verse demonstrates. For God is the source of all values, and if we are wrong about him, we can soon be wrong about everything. It doesn't take someone very long, I think, to move away from God. I think we can see it every day, where a person, take for instance, this is a very simple example, but a pandemic happens and we can't come to church, but we have live stream, right? So we can watch it. And we do. Most time, right? Most people are watching it. And then, we could go to church. The building's open. And but are all people coming back to church?
No.
And how many of them do you think are still live streaming?
No, you can see the numbers on the views are dropping. I've noticed that.
Right.
Because I've even said, show Trinity Love and hit the thumbs up. And if you've got 26 views and 26 watching, you only have like 3 thumbs up. And I've been watching that because I've been a little lazy and been online more than coming to church because I haven't been sleeping. But I've been noticing that. Like even a couple of months ago, we would have like 126, 118 watching. And this week, for the longest time, it was only 26. I don't know what the number is now.
I don't know. I don't go out to the live stream because I'm in church.
Yeah, but that's what's...
I mean, and,
I mean...
Yeah, because when we were in New Jersey, we watch it,
Yeah.
so we don't miss the sermon series.
And I said, but this is on 20, like you said, 26. But are you, because I don't understand all this, but sometimes we wouldn't watch it at 9, we'd watch it at 10.
Right, but that view still comes up.
But not if you're looking at it, if you're looking at it at live. time, it's
Live,
not
yeah,
coming
it
up.
won't be there. You go back like the next day and see how many views, full views, complete views that they'll get.
Right, but I'm thinking maybe it's not quite as bad as your.
No, but I noticed it Sunday because I felt good.
I don't know. I know in the very beginning, live streaming, it was hundreds of people. I mean, people from all over, not just Trinity people. There were people from all over the United States. We had a guy from Virginia that watched it every week. That always send, you know, how you fill out the connection slip and could put a little blurb there. Every week he writes something. So that's why they knew, you know, it was the same person all the time. I don't know. I haven't heard anything.
I've been on live chatted with him, and Bill Schaefer would live chat with him. No, he hasn't shown up.
I don't know.
He might show up, but not.
Well, and another example even is with church. I mean, disregarding, you know, the pandemic or anything. People, you know, they'll come to church and then say they get sick and they miss 1 week, and then, you know, the next week it's like, you know, I don't know. Do I feel good enough to go? And, you know, before you know, they've missed 2 months of Sundays, you know, and it's hard. It's so easy, and that's what they're saying here. It's so easy for those values that getting up every Sunday, going to church, and being an active member, all it takes is maybe to miss one Sunday. And next thing you know, you're missing the next Sunday, then the next Sunday, then the next. And then you need something to reverse you again, don't you? And that's why it's so important, and right now, we don't have it in place because of the pandemic, but when somebody missed more than, say, a month, they would get a call. And you'd be surprised how many times those calls were made and they'd find out, well, oh, guess what? You know, I was in the hospital for, you know, but they never called the church to let them know. I mean, that's, you know, that's okay. But then there's people who just never came back. We had people move already and not tell us they moved. I mean, but it's very easy to get away from the values. And so we need to be cognizant of that. We need to understand that, you know, how strong is your faith? You know, and our faith every Sunday is built upon, isn't it? The sermons, the whole church service is there to build us up, and also to convict us. You know, if we've sinned. The sermon, I was taught in seminary that if your pastor preaches a sermon and you never walk out of there convicted of your sin, then he didn't do a good job. And now, are you convicted every week?
No, you just understand what he's teaching. So you already realize that you're a sinner, that's why you're there anyway.
But what else should convict you?
Holy Spirit.
Well, the Holy Spirit, but what something do we do that should convict us?
Confession of sins.
Yes. That and the fact that you're there to take communion. Communion is what gives us our forgiveness.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
But you're asked to confess your sins. Well, that's telling you sinned, so, you know, what have you done this past week that you need to ask God to forgive you?
I don't have enough time.
Well, like I told the confirmation kids, you want to cover all your bases, so you always say, please forgive all my sins, known and unknown. Because you don't know every sin you've done.
Yeah,
And if you think you've only done one, you're kidding yourself.
I don't
Yeah.
know why I wrote this. You know how I am. I wrote, those that follow the Lord understand where we are weak and ask God for his help for our forgiveness.
Well, and we do.
So we understand when we're in church.
Well,
You need help.
we hope everybody does.
Well, yeah, yeah.
Mary Lou, sometimes I thought about this, the communion's down here in this outline of the service, after the sermon and other things. But the prayer of confession is up here.
Right.
And it's almost like there's a disconnect that the forgiveness is here. Why aren't they together?
I don't know.
They used to be.
They do the confessions in the beginning, and then, I don't know. I'd have to talk to,
If the sermon's going to convict you of something, then
right.
time for confession also would be after that.
Well, but also, how many, I mean, there's times where we don't do the confession, but yet we do communion. So when do you ask God when do you confess your sins then? See, I'll go through the confession, but when I do my prayers after communion, I still talk to him about my sins.
Yeah, I think maybe that's what I do as well.
You know, because like you said, I mean, they only give you like a minute. You know,
And years ago, we didn't have it every week.
no.
What do you mean, yeah, communion?
Well, no, you were lucky if you got it once a month.
The first Sunday.
Well, and there are churches today that still only do it once a month. The chapel at Oakcrest only does it the first Sunday of the month. When I did my internship at First Lutheran, they did it the first Sunday of the month. Not even, I mean, smaller churches especially that have smaller congregations, it's a financial issue. You know, and they don't have it but it also goes back to historical, you know, historically the churches didn't do it because they felt that by doing it every week, it took power away from it. Power might be the wrong word, but you know what I'm saying, the meaning of it. And so, you know.
Wasn't it in the book of Acts where the early church at their meetings, they always had bread and wine?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it was usually connected to a meal too. They'd have a meal and then they'd have the communion. The church that we attend in New Jersey, this must go back 10 or 15 years, they decided to start having communion every Sunday. Before it was like the first and fourth, or just the first. We had people leaving the church up there over that.
Oh, yes.
One couple, 50 years they've been attending. No, and they would only come on the first Sunday when they had communion, and then they stopped coming altogether. It's just,
Well, because they don't.
They do a lot of changes. I do the churches I've seen and heard about through the family. If there's changes made, a lot of people will use that to leave after here.
Well, yeah, it happens everywhere.
Yeah.
Every time you get a new pastor, you've got people leaving.
True. True.
well, that happened when Pastor Paul left.
Yeah.
The first time even. When he left the first time.
Yeah.
That's the first time.
When he went to Florida.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, and now we have
30 days notice, we got to this time. That hurt a lot of people's feelings.
Well, I'm sorry, say again.
When he gave his 30-day notice that he was leaving, Pastor Paul, that, you know, I'll be gone in 30 days. We all got that letter. A lot of people's feelings were hurt. You know, they were like, oh, they couldn't adjust to not being over there and shake his hand. You know, they missed him that much, even before it happened. It was sad.
Now we're using Ben.
What?
Yeah, Ben,
Ben wrote a letter. Yeah, it was on email.
I have a copy of it from the internet.
Oh,
Bill
I'll
showed
look
it
up.
to me.
Ben is going to be an ordained pastor, and he's accepted a call to a smaller church in Williamsport, Pennsylvania. He will be here till November 5th. So, you know, this is the same thing as what went on with Pastor Dave. You know, he became more, you know, he finished seminary and he wanted to be a pastor somewhere too. He wanted his own church. Well, Ben does too. So you have to be happy for him. Don't be sad for him.
Oh, I'm very
You know, or angry. I was upset when I first heard it because I thought he'd stay here, but he's not. But I wish him all the, you know, the blessings in the world because he is meant to be a pastor.
Oh, yeah. And how old is he? Often.
He's like 28 or 29,
Yes.
something like that.
He's got a good road up. God will lead him where he needs.
Yeah. So we'll just have to make another adjustment. You know, we're good at that. So anyway,
So a little older.
Yeah, he's got to be older than that.
no.
Well, he's got 3 kids.
Yeah, but he was,
But he's been here 9 years. He went to college, so that figured if he was 9.
oh, he might be 30 then now, but I don't think he's much older than that.
He just looks young. That's the other thing.
Well, that's why when he came here as the youth director, they loved him because he was close to their age. And they, you know, and the kids still love him. I mean, they'll congregate around him. You know, the kids that he worked with and all that. Yeah. But anyway, okay. Woe number 5 is chapter 21. And it's woe to those who are wise in their own eyes and clever in their own sight. Basically, you know, this verse may also link back to the previous woe, for the reversal of values expressed there may form the basis for the new wisdom, okay, of the godless, which is antagonistic to the divine wisdom. In other words, you know, they're saying, okay, well, I have this new wisdom, so I'm pretty wise here.
My
They're
Bible
conceited.
says it's being
Yeah,
conceded.
they're prideful and conceited.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're, you know, you're right. And they think they're all wise and doing okay. But God's going to show them they're not. That's right.
And they have clever thinking.
Yeah. And woe 6 is 22 and 23. And verse 21 condemned the outlook of those who thought themselves wise, while verse 22 exposes the folly of that wisdom. These men assess themselves as heroes and champions, and they were no sober judgments. It was, you know, it was all the drunk, the drink talking. Okay. And the situation is even more scandalous when we learn that these men occupied positions of great responsibility, needing a clear head and an unweakened moral sense. Okay, so here we have the leaders. Okay, and their judgment is fogged up with their drink, right? And but yet they're in positions of high responsibility, and they don't have, you know, would we want, I'll just use, would we want our pastor to be an alcoholic? I mean, think of the decisions that he has to make for the church. Now, does he make them alone? No, he doesn't. But he can certainly influence, can he? So if he's not directing, leading us with a clear, a clear mind, you can look at it in the political sense. Our governor. Would we want our governor to be leading us from a drunk stupor? Yeah. And that's what's happening here in Judah. Their leadership is, partying and drinking, and yet they're supposed to be leading the people in a responsible way. And how can you? But, and also, in the place of justice wasn't being done. They were acting corruptly. And that was addressed earlier when they said in Woe 1, with the property, with the house, right? They're buying up, they're going against God's law. God gave them the land, and they're not supposed to sell it. But yet they were buying it up and to just get richer and richer and richer. So now we're going to look at the judgment. The judgment is 24 through 30. Therefore, as tongues of fire lick up straw, and as dry grass sinks down in the flames, so their roots will decay and their flowers blow away the dust. For they have rejected the law of the Lord Almighty and spurned the word of the Holy One of Israel. Therefore, the Lord's anger burns against his people. His hand is raised, and he strikes them down. The mountains shake, and the dead bodies are the refuge in the streets. Yet for all this, his anger is not turned away. His hand is still upraised. He lifts up a banner for the distant nations. He whistles for those at the ends of the earth. Here they come, swiftly and speedily. Not one of them grows tired or stumbles. Not one slumbers or sleeps. Not a belt is loosened at the waist. Not a sandal thong is broken. Their arrows are sharp. All their bows are strung. Their horses' hooves seem like flint. Their chariots' wheels like a whirlwind. Their roar is like that of the lion. The roar like young lions. They growl as they seize their prey and carry it off with no one to rescue. In the day they will roar over it like the roaring of the sea. And if one looks at the land, he will see darkness and distress. Even the light will be darkened by the clouds. So, the woes are done. And now the supreme judge begins to declare sentence. And the fire of God will burn them. The hand of God will smite them. Grassland fires are comprehensive and quick, as well as the judge will be. The cause is spelled out in detail in the woes as expressed as rejection of God's word, law, his law. In verse 25, verse 25 seems to refer to a specific judgment not to be regarded as an isolated event, but as a manifestation of the divine anger that continued to burn against the people. Verse 25 is, therefore the Lord's anger burns against his people, his hand is raised, and he strikes them down. He is not going to relent. We look at verse 26 through 30. I want you to close your eyes, okay? Don't peek. Just close your eyes. If you have to, put your hand over your eyes. And I'm going to read this description because it's very vivid, and I want you to see it happening. Okay. He lifts up a banner for the distant nations. He whistles for those at the ends of the earth. Here they come, swiftly and speedily. Not one of them grows tired or stumbles. Not one slumbers or sleeps. Not a belt is loosened at the waist. Not a sandal thong is broken. Their arrows are sharp. All their bows are strung. Their horses' hooves seem like flint. Their chariot wheels like a whirlwind. Their roar is like that of the lion. They roar like young lions. They growl as they seize their prey and carry it off with no one to rescue. In that day, they will roar over it like the roaring of the sea. And if one looks at the land, he will see darkness and distress. Even the light will be darkened by the clouds. So, what is happening? Yeah, they're being conquered. And so the great judgment is to come through a great army from afar. They're swift and single-minded. They're effective, ferocious, and terrifying. The prophet's thoughts moved from figure of roaring lion to that of the roaring sea. Perhaps the sea would be a means of escape from the foe if it had been less turbulent. He declared there was no hope over land either. The cloud of the Assyrian judgment blotted out any light that might have indicated an escape route. Now, we know, don't we, who overcomes Judah. Is it Assyria?
No, Babylon.
It's Babylon. So why would they bring up Assyria? Who's the king now? Do we know?
Ahaz.
No. I think that's.
Oh, you talk about when Babylon.
No, we know that Assyria wanted to attack. We know that they wanted to attack, but God stepped in because the king asked him to. Remember that from First and Second Kings, and that's why I had to think a little bit about why did they bring up Assyria, because we know that Babylon is the one who Assyria took over Israel, the northern kingdom, but not the southern, and that's why. And I'm trying to think of. I thought I had it. I might have it in the questions. Oh, here it is. Well, it was in my commentary, but it's also in my notes here.
Well, yeah, but it actually isn't in the reading that we just read.
It's not in the reading.
Okay.
It's not in the scripture. It's not in the scripture reading. Okay. Lifts up a banner. This is my note. A pole with a banner was often placed on a hill as a signal for gathering troops or for summoning the nations to bring Israel back home. And then it talks about distant nations. It brought up distant nations, such as Assyria, whose enemies struck Israel and Judah in 722 and 701, and Babylon, which began its invasions in 605. Those at the ends of the earth, nations like Egypt and Assyria. But we know Babylon is the one that overtook and took them into captivity. Okay, let's go to the questions. We're doing good. Okay, question number 1. They consider verses 1 through 7 a parable. Now, my question to you is what parable is it similar to?
The one where the seed falls among stone or among good soil or in three different ways.
Oh, the parable of the good seed that Jesus was
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
talking. Yeah. Some seed takes, some seed, the weeds blow away. Some seed lays in rocks.
Yeah. No, no, that's not the one that,
Jesus said to the fruit tree,
the fig tree?
fig tree.
Uh-uh. It is one of Jesus' parables, but it's of the tenants.
Given money.
Yeah. Yeah. Remember, there was 3 of them. One got 10, one got 8, and the other one got 1. Well, the 10 and the 8, they took them and reinvested them and made more money. And but the third guy with only the 1, he buries it because he's afraid of the owner, that if he loses it, he's going to be punished. So he buries it. So now the owner comes back. He's all happy because the first one, he doubled the money, and so did the second one. But then when he talks to the third guy, he buried it. He only has the 1. And they're relating that, and I think the way they relate is because of the house, all of that. That they're the vineyard is Judah, okay? But the owner is God. And basically, he's given them the vineyard, but it doesn't bear the fruit he wants it to. And that's what the tenants, they were supposed to bear fruit for their owner, but the one guy didn't. And that's where they're going with that. And now whether, I mean, Jesus hadn't done the tenants yet, but why they're comparing it to that one, I'm not sure. I like the one with about the seeds, where they were planted more than I like the tenants. But anyway, I picked that up when I was doing my lesson. And question is, what is the message of the parables in 5 verses 1 through 7? What is the message?
The message was that they were to bear fruit. By bearing fruit was to follow God's rules.
Okay, they were supposed to bear fruit.
If they didn't, they'd be cut down like a bad fruit tree.
Right. They were to carry out all his work and do everything that he wanted.
Right. Right. And that is certainly the message. And if they didn't, he was going to pass his judgment, which he will. Okay, let's go over to...
So I think the point here is that we're to examine our fruit, so to speak, what we're supposed to do and how are we doing.
Yeah, well, I think that's true. I mean, when we're doing this, we want to take something out of it to put into our lives. I always ask for God to do that for us, right? So that's one thing that we can take away. Look at our lives. How are we passing on the gospel? Isn't that what we're supposed to do? So how are we doing that? How are we enabling maybe other people to do that? I mean, where are we with our spiritual life? That's what we need to take stock in. Okay, question 2. How does 5, 1 through 7 portray God's character? Now, his name is never mentioned in verses 1 through 7. But yet, you know who it is. So how do we know? How is he portrayed in those 7 verses?
He did everything for him.
Yeah, I mean, he took all the rocks out and, he cleaned it up, right? And we know, I mean, when you think back to them going into the promised land, what did he do? He fought for them.
Yeah.
He helped them, get rid of all the people in the area that they were given. And so, here he cleared all the stones. He planted the choicest vines. He did everything for them.
Did everything to prepare a fruitful harvest.
And yet, he didn't get that.
He got that bitter ended.
Yes, he did. Okay, question 3 is a little bit more. You have to look at each individual chapters, which are the woes, actually. Explain the meaning of each of the 6 sins the Lord condemns in verses 8 through 30. Verse 5-8 is the first woe. So,
I wrote exportation, unfairly buying houses, homes, and fields till everyone is evicted, and then you're going to live on the land all by yourself.
okay,
Right? They're gonna explore land where the vineyard's not producing now.
yeah.
Well, they're exploiting others.
Well, yeah, they are, because they're buying the land off of the poor.
Or,
Right. And, it even says there, one of the things that they're taking advantage of, they're not doing what they're supposed to do for the poor. Okay, verses 11 through 12, they're the... Oh, yes, yes. That was not hard to come up with. Okay, 5, well, and because of the drunkenness, they're not showing any respect for God. They've lost that. Verses 18 and 19. That's the third woe.
Taking sarcastic pride in sin.
Sinning and not feeling guilty about it.
Yeah, and what is the major sin?
well, they're not taking care of the widows or the children.
Yeah,
They're taking away their land.
Just about everything they do very arrogantly, like they're.
right. Right. Well, it's basically put down as rejection of God and His ways. Okay, verse 20, which is the fourth woe.
Confusing moral standards.
Yeah. Yep. Their values are reversed, right? Okay, 21, verse, which is the fifth woe.
Being conceited.
Okay.
It's in their own eyes.
Well, yeah, they thought they were so great. Okay, 22 to 23.
Accepting bribes and not feeling guilty about it.
Right, but what did they think of themselves? Who did they think they were? It says it right there. I have it underlined.
Yeah, they thought they were God.
Well, they thought they were heroes and champions. Yeah. And instead, they were complete opposite. Because they weren't taking care of the widows or the poor or anything. They were, if anything, going against them. Okay, question 4. Ask the Lord, and you don't have to respond if you don't want to. Ask the Lord if you have tendencies toward any sins like those you listed in question 3. Does 5:8 through 30 have any implications for your life? If so, what are they? And I simply wrote, these woes show us how easy it is for us to move away from God, go towards all the worldly things that cause us to sin and divide us from God. That's what I wrote.
I think conceited is one that's very easily done by all of us. Not that I look at Jerry, but I look like a movie star. The fact that you did well in your career and you pat yourself on the back, especially if you got a raise. I mean, there's a lot of different things. You're good at sports. You're kind of
Proud of yourself.
up here.
Well, but what helps us do that too?
So I'm sorry.
What helps us do that?
God helps. He guides
What
us.
helps us feel conceit?
Yeah.
Well,
What out in the world makes us think that we're... Yeah, right. I mean, when you look at all of the sports people, you know, you can see the ones that that are conceited, but there many of them aren't, you know. But
Of course, the most popular, most paid players are ones that they get all the adulation.
yes,
The ordinary lineman that might make $2 million a year, which is still a lot of money, you don't hear them pat themselves on the back.
You don't hear a lot of the good ones.
well, yeah, in any of the sports, I mean, there's there's not even equality among them. You know, like he was saying, I mean, there are players that only make $2 million a year. I wish I did, but you know, but I mean, the quarterback, how much do you think they're making?
Well, the guy in Kansas City, Mahomes, has a $125 million contract.
Now, is he really worth that? See, that's what I mean, it blows my mind when I read about these salaries, and it's not just football players, it's baseball players, and I mean, everybody, the money that I mean, it's just unreal.
You got a list, I do this on the iPad every once in a while, because I'm curious how much money that some of these movie stars make.
Oh,
I mean, like Jennifer Aniston, like worth like $300 million, and Cruz is $500 million. I mean, you know, good for them, I guess, but who really needs that much money?
Well, Kim Kardashian, I have you know,
Billion.
just got her $60 million home awarded to her in her divorce. Well, what is wrong with these people? $60 million. So her kids can still live in the home that they knew.
well,
So when they go out on their own, they'll want everything in.
Exactly.
well, that's true. Yes.
When I read that, I thought, you're not even worth $60 million. I think it hurts.
Well, you're not missing anything.
Mm-mm-mm.
That whole family is.
Nuts.
I
looked at a couple of these episodes a couple years back and I thought, this is television?
This is what they're getting paid
Well-
to do. What kind of people watch that?
Yeah.
See, and I don't want to be around those kind of people that watch
My
that.
hearing aids show I was
I prefer the made-up ones called soap operas.
Yeah.
And I shouldn't be watching that.